A lonely cowboy woke up to find 3 native sisters on his porch. They told him he had until sundown. The cowboy woke before the sun, the same way he always did. The sky was still dark, and the stars hung low like quiet watchers over the wide land. He lay in bed for a moment, listening to the soft sound of the wind moving through the tall grass outside his small house. The place was simple, built from old wood and hard work. There were no nearby neighbors, no busy roads, and no loud mornings. Just him, the land, and the slow passing of time. He pulled on his boots and stepped outside. The air was cool and clean. His horse stood near the fence waiting, as if it knew the day would be the same as all the others. He walked over, patted its neck, and began his morning routine. He checked the fence lines, filled the water trough, and made sure the barn doors were still strong after the night wind. These small tasks gave him peace. They filled the empty spaces in his mind. He had not always lived this way. There was a time when his life was louder, a time when his house held more than one voice. But those days were gone, and he did not often let himself think about them. The land became his comfort. The quiet became his friend. Later in the morning, he went back inside and made coffee on the old stove. He sat at the small table near the window, looking out at the wide field that stretched toward the hills. On the wall nearby hung a faded photo in a simple frame. It showed a younger version of himself standing next to an older man, his father. They were both smiling, standing in front of the same house, though the wood looked newer back then. The cowboy touched the edge of the frame for a moment, then turned away. Some memories were easier to keep closed. The day passed slowly. He worked on a broken fence post near the far edge of his land. The sun climbed higher, warming the ground in his back. Birds moved across the sky in wide, gentle lines. From time to time he thought he heard something else, a sound that did not belong to the land. But each time, it was just the wind or his own footsteps. By late afternoon, the light began to soften. The sky turned a gentle gold, and long shadows stretched across the grass. He packed up his tools and headed back toward the house. That was when he saw them. 3 figures stood on his porch. At first, he thought he was seeing things. No one ever came out here. The nearest town was far away, and most people did not even know his road existed. But as he got closer, he saw them clearly. 3 sisters. They stood side by side, each different in height and presence, but connected in a way that was easy to feel even from a distance. They looked tired, their clothes dusty from travel. Their eyes were serious, watching him as he walked up the steps. He stopped a few feet away, unsure what to say. The land around them felt different now, like it was holding its breath. The tallest sister spoke first. Her voice was calm, but firm. "We didn't mean to surprise you," she said, "but we needed to find you." He nodded slowly. "You found me," he replied. "What brings you all the way out here?" The middle sister looked around at the house, the barn, and the wide land beyond. "This place," she said, "it has a story." He felt a strange pull in his chest at her words, though he did not know why. The youngest sister stepped forward. She held something in her hand, an old piece of paper folded many times. "We were told our grandmother worked on this land long ago," she said. "She trusted someone here to keep a promise." He frowned. "I've lived here most of my life," he said. "Just me and my father before me. I don't know anything about a promise." The tall sister met his eyes. "That's why we're here. We believe the truth is still here, even if it's been quiet for a long time." They explained that their family had passed down a story through generations. A small piece of land near a riverbend close to this ranch had special meaning to them. Their grandmother believed it would be protected, but over time, the land changed hands. Papers were lost, and the story became harder to prove. He listened, arms crossed, not in anger but in confusion. This was the last thing he expected to hear on an evening like this. "So what are you asking from me?" he said. The tall sister took a breath. "We're not here to take anything from you," she said. "We just want to find the truth. We were told you might have something. A record, a note, anything that explains what really happened." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in deep orange and soft red. The land seemed to glow, like it was part of the conversation. He hesitated. You can't just walk into someone's life and ask for answers, he said quietly. The youngest sister nodded. We know, she said. That's why we came together. There was something in her voice that made him pause. It was not demanding. It was hopeful. He looked at the porch where they stood. For years it had only seen him, his boots, and the dust of the land. Now it held three people with a story that reached far beyond his own. Come inside, he finally said. They stepped into the small house. It was simple, but clean. The sisters looked around with quiet interest. The middle sister noticed the photo on the wall. Is that your father? She asked. He nodded. He built most of this place himself. They sat at the table. He poured water for everyone. The room felt smaller with more people in it, but also warmer. They talked for a long time. The sisters shared more about their grandmother, about how she used to speak of the riverbend as a place where people made promises they were meant to keep. He shared what he knew about his father, how he never talked much about the past but kept old boxes in the barn that he never threw away. As the sky outside turned dark, a feeling settled over him. A feeling that this was not just a visit. It was the start of something he did not yet understand. The tall sister stood up and walked to the door. She looked out at the land, now quiet, under the night sky. We don't want to stay longer than we should, she said, but we can't leave without trying. He followed her gaze, looking toward the distant river, hidden in the dark. How much time do you think this will take? He asked. She turned back to him. Until sundown tomorrow, she said. The words hung in the air. He felt the weight of them, even though he did not know what they would bring. After the sisters left for the night, he stood alone on the porch. The stars had returned bright and steady. The land felt the same, yet different. For the first time in years, he did not feel alone out there. He did not know what he would find in the barn, in the old boxes, or in the past his father never spoke about. But he knew one thing. The sun rose slowly the next morning, spreading soft light across the wide land. The cowboy stood on his porch with a cup of warm coffee in his hands, watching the sky change color. The quiet felt different now. It was no longer empty. It was waiting. Down the road he saw movement. The three sisters were walking back toward the house. They had camped near the trees by the river bend, not far from the ranch. He could tell by the way they walked that they were tired, but determined. They did not come all this way to turn back easily. He set the cup down and stepped forward to meet them. Morning, he said. Morning, the tall sister replied. Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of worry behind it. We didn't want to waste any time.
He nodded.
Neither do I. They walked together toward the barn. The air was cool, and the grass still held drops of dew that soaked the bottoms of their shoes. Birds called from the fence posts, and the land stretched wide and open around them like it was listening. Inside the barn, the light was dim. Dust floated in the air, glowing in thin beams of sunlight that slipped through the cracks in the wood. Old tools hung on the walls. Boxes and crates were stacked along the back, some of them so old that the writing on them had faded. He pointed to the stacks. My father kept a lot of things, he said. He never threw much away. The middle sister smiled slightly. Sometimes people hold on to things because they matter, even if they don't talk about them. They began to search. The youngest sister opened one box at a time, lifting out old clothes, rusted horseshoes, and folded papers. The tall sister checked a wooden chest near the wall. The cowboy moved through the stacks slowly, careful not to knock anything over. As they worked, they talked. The middle sister told them about their grandmother. She had been a strong woman, small in size but firm in her words. She used to sit by the fire and tell stories about the riverbend, about how it was a place where people once met to help each other, no matter where they came from. She said someone promised her the land would be kept safe, the sister said. Not owned, not sold, just respected. The cowboy listened. He tried to picture his father as a younger man, standing by a river making a promise. It felt strange. His father had always been quiet, more comfortable with animals than with people. But maybe there was more to him than the son ever knew. After a while, the youngest sister called out, "I found something." They gathered around her. In her hands was a small box made of wood and tied with an old piece of rope. The rope was frayed, but the knot still held. The cowboy took it gently. He untied the rope and opened the lid. Inside were a few papers, yellowed with age. There was also a small notebook, thin and worn. He felt his heart beat faster. "This looks like my father's," he said quietly. They sat down on a bale of hay. He opened the notebook carefully, as if it might fall apart in his hands. The writing inside was neat, but faded. The words told of daily life, of weather, of work, of small moments that mattered to him. Then, a few pages in, the writing changed. "Met a woman by the river today," he read out loud. "She spoke of her family and their past. She asked me to help protect this place." "I told her I would." The sisters exchanged looks. He kept reading. "She said this land is more than ground and water. It holds memory. I don't fully understand, but I feel the weight of her words. I will keep this promise even if no one else remembers it." The youngest sister covered her mouth with her hand. The tall sister closed her eyes for a moment. The cowboy felt a tight feeling in his chest. "He never told me about this," he said. The middle sister spoke softly. "Some promises are carried quietly." They continued reading. The notebook spoke of his father placing markers near the riverbend, of keeping people away when they tried to build too close, of turning down offers to sell that part of the land. Then the writing stopped. The rest of the notebook was blank. The cowboy closed it slowly. "I had no idea," he said. "I grew up thinking this was just land, just dirt and grass." The tall sister looked at him. "Now you know it's more." They stepped outside. The sun was higher now, and the day was growing warmer. They decided to go to the riverbend together. The walk was quiet. The land felt peaceful, but also heavy, like it was waiting for something to be decided. When they reached the river, the cowboy stopped. The water moved slowly, reflecting the sky above. The trees around it were tall and old, their roots stretching deep into the ground. The youngest sister walked closer and placed her hand on one of the trees. "This is it," she said. This is the place she talked about. The cowboy looked around. He remembered coming here as a child, skipping stones across the water, sitting in the shade when the sun was too hot. He had never thought of it as anything special. Now, it felt different. They sat by the water and talked. They shared stories about their families, about growing up, about the paths that brought them here. The cowboy told them about his father, about how he used to wake him up early to teach him how to work the land, how to listen to the wind and the animals.
"He always said the land doesn't belong to us," he said.
"He said we belong to the land." The middle sister smiled. Sounds like he understood more than he let on. As the afternoon passed, clouds gathered in the sky. The wind picked up, and the air grew cooler. A rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. They hurried back toward the house. By the time they reached the porch, rain began to fall. They went inside, closing the door behind them as the storm grew stronger. The sound of rain on the roof filled the small house. They sat close together at the table, the notebook and paper spread out in front of them. The storm seemed to slow time. The world outside faded into gray and sound. The cowboy felt something he had not felt in a long time. Connection. Not just to the land, but to the people sitting across from him. The tall sister broke the silence. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked at the notebook, then at them. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I don't think this ends here." When the storm finally passed, the light outside was soft and calm. The sky had cleared, and the air smelled fresh. They stepped back onto the porch. The land looked new, washed clean by the rain. The cowboy looked toward the hills, then back at the sisters. "My father kept his promise," he said. "But I think it's my turn now." The tall sister nodded. "Sundown is still coming." He took a deep breath. He knew the next step would not be easy. The town, the people, the rules and the money that moved through them would not all agree with what the notebook said. But as he looked at the river in the distance, he knew he could not turn away. The day was moving forward. The next morning came with a soft breeze that moved through the grass like a quiet promise. The cowboy stood outside the house, looking toward the distant hills. The riverbend was hidden from view, but he could feel it there, waiting. The notebook rested in his hand, its worn cover warm from the early sun. Inside the house, the sisters were already awake. The youngest sister was making a simple breakfast using the small stove. The middle sister was standing by the window, watching the clouds drift slowly across the sky. The tall sister stepped outside to join him. "You didn't sleep much," she said gently. He shook his head. "I kept thinking about what comes next." She nodded. So did we. They ate together in quiet. The sound of plates and cups filled the small room, but their thoughts were somewhere else. The day before had given them answers, but also more questions. After breakfast, the cowboy pulled out a folded map from one of the boxes they had found in the barn. It was old, and the lines were faint, but he could still make out the markings near the river bend. "My father drew this," he said. "I think he marked places he wanted to keep people away from." The middle sister leaned closer. "There," she said, pointing to a small circle near the river. "That's where our grandmother said the promise was made." The youngest sister looked up. "What do we do with this?" He took a slow breath. "We go to town." The word hung in the air. The town was not far, but it felt like another world. The cowboy did not go there often. He liked the quiet of the land more than the noise of streets and voices. The sisters exchanged looks, knowing what that meant. "People there may not want to hear this," the tall sister said. "I know," he replied. "But they should." They saddled his horse and borrowed another from a neighbor who lived a few miles away. The ride into town was slow. The land changed as they moved forward. Open fields turned into fenced yards, and dirt roads turned into paved streets. The town came into view, small but busy. People walked in and out of shops. Cars passed by, and voices mixed with the sound of doors opening and closing. The cowboy felt eyes on them as they rode in. The three sisters stood out not because of how they looked, but because they carried a purpose that others could feel. They stopped near the town hall, a simple building with wide steps and a flag that moved in the wind. The cowboy dismounted and tied the horses. "Ready?" he asked. The youngest sister took a deep breath. "As will ever be." Inside, the air was cooler. A few people sat in chairs waiting for their turn to speak with the clerk at the front desk. When they saw the group walk in, some of them whispered to each other. The cowboy stepped forward. "We need to speak with someone about land records." The clerk looked up, surprised. "You usually keep to yourself," he said. "What's this about?" The cowboy placed the notebook on the counter. "This is about a promise." The clerk hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." They sat on a bench near the wall. Time moved slowly. The middle sister tapped her foot against the floor. The tall sister kept her eyes forward, calm but alert. The youngest sister held the map in her hands, smoothing the folds over and over. Finally, a man came out from the back. He was older, with gray hair and tired eyes. "I'm the one who handles records," he said. "What can I help you with?" The cowboy stood. "We found this notebook. It talks about a piece of land near the river bend. It says it was meant to be protected." The man took the notebook and flipped through it. His face changed as he read. "This is your father's writing," he said slowly. "I remember him." The cowboy nodded. "He never told me about this." The man sighed. "There were plans years ago. People wanted to build near the river. Your father came here with papers and words that made us stop. He said it wasn't just land. It was a promise." The tall sister stepped forward. "Our grandmother was the one who asked him." The man looked at her, surprised. Then the story comes full circle. He walked to a cabinet and pulled out a thick file. Inside were old records, maps and letters. He spread them out on a table. "This land was never officially marked as protected," he said. But there are notes, warnings, requests. Your father kept pushing for it. The cowboy felt a mix of pride and sadness. So what happens now? The man looked around the room. Now people will want to talk. By the afternoon, word had spread. A small group gathered in the town hall. Some were curious. Some were doubtful. Others looked annoyed.
A woman stood up. "That land could bring money to this town," she said.
"Why protect it now?" the tall sister answered calmly. "Because it was meant to be protected from the start." Another man crossed his arms. "Stories and notebooks don't change records." The cowboy stepped forward. "Maybe not. But they change people." He spoke about his father, about the promise, about the riverbend and what it meant to more than just one family. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse anyone. He just told the truth as he knew it. The room grew quiet. The middle sister spoke next. She shared her grandmother's story, how she believed the land held memories, how it was a place where people once came together instead of standing apart. The youngest sister held up the map. "This is where it happened," she said. "This is where the promise lives." Some people nodded. Others looked away. The man with the gray hair stood. "We can review this," he said. "We can talk about marking the land as shared heritage. It won't be quick, but it can be done." The cowboy felt a small weight lift from his chest. Outside, the sun was already moving toward the horizon. They stepped out into the street, the sky painted with soft colors. The tall sister looked at him. "You didn't have to do this." He shook his head. "I think I did." They rode back to the ranch in quiet. The land welcomed them with open space and fresh air. When they reached the river bend, the cowboy stopped. The water reflected the orange and pink of the sky. "This place feels different now," the youngest sister said. He nodded. "So do I." They sat by the river as the sun sank lower. The day was almost over, but something new had begun. The cowboy thought about his father, about the promise that had traveled through time to reach this moment. He did not know what the town would decide. He did not know how long the process would take. But as he looked at the sisters, at the land, and at the quiet strength of the river, he knew one thing. The promise was no longer hidden. The morning after the town meeting felt heavier than the ones before. The cowboy woke up to a sky covered in pale clouds, like the land itself was thinking about what had been said. The air was cool, and the wind moved slowly through the grass. He stood on the porch for a long moment, looking out across the wide field. The riverbend was still there, quiet and steady, waiting for the next step. Inside, the sisters were already awake. The youngest sister was tying her boots. The middle sister was folding the map carefully and placing it back into her bag. The tall sister stood near the door, looking calm but thoughtful. "People in town will talk today," she said. "They always do after something like that." He nodded. "They talked yesterday, too." The middle sister smiled a little, but yesterday they listened. They ate breakfast in quiet. The sound of spoons against bowls filled the small room. Each of them seemed lost in their own thoughts. The cowboy kept seeing the faces of the people in town, the mix of hope and doubt in their eyes. After they finished, he stood up. "There's something else you should see." They followed him out to the barn. He walked past the tools and boxes and stopped near a corner where an old door leaned against the wall. He pulled it aside, revealing a small space behind it. "I found this years ago," he said. "I never knew what it was for." He reached in and pulled out a wooden post. It was worn and smooth from age. Carved into it were simple marks and symbols. The youngest sister's eyes widened. "Our grandmother described something like this," she said. "She said there were signs near the river." The cowboy carried the post outside. They walked together toward the river bend, following the path through the tall grass. The clouds above moved slowly, letting small patches of sunlight through. When they reached the water, the cowboy stopped near one of the trees. He pressed the bottom of the post into the soft ground. It fit perfectly, like it had been there before. The middle sister placed her hand over the carving. "This is it," she said softly. "This is where they marked the promise." The tall sister looked around. Then this place has been speaking all along. They stood there for a while, listening to the water and the wind. The world felt quiet and wide, like it was giving them space to think. Later that day, a car drove up the dirt road toward the ranch. The cowboy saw it from the porch and felt a tightness in his chest. Visitors usually meant trouble or change. The car stopped and a man stepped out. He wore a clean jacket and held a folder under his arm. He looked around the land like he was measuring it with his eyes. "Can I help you?" the cowboy asked, stepping forward. The man smiled politely. "I'm here about the land near the river. I heard there's a discussion in town." The cowboy crossed his arms. "There is." The man opened the folder. "There's interest in developing this area. Trails, small buildings, things that could bring people here." The youngest sister stepped forward. "This place isn't meant for that." The man looked surprised to see them. "I didn't know anyone else was involved." The tall sister spoke calmly. "We are. This land holds a promise." The man sighed. "Promises don't always stop progress." The cowboy felt something rise inside him, but he kept his voice steady. "Sometimes progress means knowing when to stop." The man looked between them, then back at the folder. "The town council will meet tonight," he said. "You should be there." As the car drove away, the middle sister let out a slow breath. "This isn't over." "No," the cowboy said. "It's just starting." They spent the afternoon gathering everything they had. The notebook, the map, the wooden post, old papers from the barn. They laid them out on the table, organizing them like pieces of a story that needed to be told clearly. The sun began to lower as they headed back to town. The sky was painted in soft colors, and the road ahead felt longer than before. When they reached the town hall, more people were there this time. The room was full of quiet voices and shifting feet. The air felt thick with waiting. The man with gray hair stood at the front. "We're here to talk about the Riverland," he said. "Everyone will have a chance to speak." The man from earlier stood up first. He talked about jobs, visitors, and how the town could grow. Some people nodded. Then the tall sister stood. She spoke about her grandmother, about how the land was a place of meeting, not building. She talked about respect and memory. The middle sister followed. She held up the map and pointed to the riverbend. "This is where people once stood together," she said. "We can stand together again." The youngest sister placed the wooden post on the table. "This was here before any of us," she said. "It's still here now." The cowboy stood last. He held the notebook in both hands. "My father wrote this," he said. "He believed this land was more than something to sell. He believed it was something to keep." The room was quiet. People began to talk among themselves. Some shared stories of their own families. Others asked questions. The meeting went on as the sky outside turned dark. Finally, the man with gray hair spoke again. "We can't decide everything tonight," he said. "But we can take a step. We can mark the riverbend as a protected site while we review the records." A murmur moved through the room. The cowboy felt his chest fill with air he didn't know he was holding. Outside, the stars were beginning to appear when they stepped back into the night. The town felt different now, like it had shifted just a little. They rode back to the ranch under the quiet sky. The land welcomed them again, open and steady. At the river bend, they stopped. The water reflected the stars, and the wooden post stood where they had placed it earlier. The tall sister looked at the cowboy. "You didn't have to stand with us," he smiled gently. "I think I was always meant to." They sat by the river, talking softly about small things. The weather, the way the land looked in different seasons, memories that felt easier to share now. The night grew deeper and the wind carried the sound of the water through the trees. The cowboy leaned back against a rock and looked up at the sky. He thought about his father, about the quiet promise that had waited all these years to be heard again. The sisters stood up, one by one. "Tomorrow," the middle sister said, "we'll see what the town decides next." He nodded. "Whatever happens, this place won't be forgotten again." They walked back toward the house together, their footsteps slow and steady on the grass. The land around them felt alive, not with the noise, but with meaning. The final morning arrived with a clear sky and a gentle breeze that moved across the land like a quiet greeting. The cowboy stood on his porch watching the first light touch the hills. The riverbend was hidden beyond the trees, but he could feel its presence, steady and patient, like it had always been. Inside the house, the sisters were awake. The youngest sister was packing her bag, folding her clothes neatly. The middle sister was standing by the window looking out at the field one last time. The tall sister sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm tea.
"Today feels different,"
the youngest sister said. The cowboy nodded. It does. They ate breakfast together slowly, as if none of them wanted to rush the moment. The small room was filled with soft light and quiet sounds. The land outside was waking up too, birds calling from the fence and the wind brushing the tall grass. After they finished, the cowboy stood and picked up the notebook. He turned it in his hands, feeling the worn cover under his fingers. "I think this belongs with you now," he said, holding it out to the tall sister. She looked surprised. "This was your father's." He smiled gently. "And his promise lives in your family's story. It connects both of us." She took the notebook carefully, like it was something fragile and important. "We'll take care of it," she said. They stepped outside together and walked toward the riverbend one last time. The path felt familiar now, like it had always been part of their lives, even before they met. When they reached the water, the wooden post stood quietly near the tree, just as they had placed it. The river moved slowly, reflecting the blue sky above. The middle sister crouched down and touched the water. "Our grandmother used to say this river carries voices," she said. "Not in sound, but in memory." The youngest sister smiled. I think she was right. They stood there for a while, letting the quiet settle around them. The cowboy felt a strange mix of peace and sadness. He knew this chapter was ending, but something new had taken its place. A car sound broke the silence. They looked back toward the road and saw the man with gray hair from the town hall walking toward them. "I came to tell you the council made a decision this morning," he said. The cowboy felt his heart beat faster. "And?" The man smiled. "The riverbend is now marked as a protected site. It won't be developed. It will be kept as shared land, open for people to visit and learn about its story." The sisters looked at each other, eyes bright with relief. "Thank you," the tall sister said. The man nodded. "Thank all of you. You reminded this town that some things are worth more than plans and money." He turned and walked back toward his car, leaving them by the river. The youngest sister let out a soft laugh, half joy and half release. "We did it!" The cowboy shook his head. "We all did!" They walked back to the house together. The sisters gathered their things and placed them near the porch. The day felt warm, not just from the sun, but from the feeling in the air. A neighbor rode up on a horse, tipping his hat. "Heard the news in town," he said. "Looks like your land's got a bit of history now." The cowboy smiled. "Looks like it always did." The neighbor laughed and rode off. The sisters stood by the porch, ready to leave. The youngest sister looked around one last time. "This place will always feel like part of our story now," she said. The middle sister turned to the cowboy. "If you ever visit our home, you'll always have a place there." He nodded. "I might take you up on that." The tall sister stepped forward and held out her hand. He took it, and they shook hands, slow and steady. "Thank you for standing with us," she said. He replied, "Thank you for helping me see what I was standing on." They loaded their bags into the car and got in. The engine started and the car slowly moved down the dirt road, leaving a soft trail of dust behind. The cowboy stood on the porch and watched until the car disappeared beyond the hills. The land felt quiet again, but not empty. He walked back inside and sat at the small table. The room felt different now, lighter, like it had been filled with something that stayed even after people left. He stood up and went to the wall where the old photo of his father hung. He looked at it for a long time. "I think I understand now," he said softly, even though no one else was there. He stepped outside and walked toward the riverbend. The path was peaceful, the grass moving gently in the breeze. When he reached the water, he sat down near the wooden post. The river flowed past him, steady and calm. A group of birds flew overhead, their shadows moving across the ground. He thought about the past, about his father, about the sisters, and about the people in town who would now come here to learn and remember. The land was no longer just his home. It was a place of connection. Later that day, he returned to the house and began fixing the old fence near the road. A car slowed as it passed, and a family waved at him. He waved back. The sun moved across the sky, marking the hours in soft light and shadow. That evening, he sat on the porch as the sun began to set. The sky turned orange and pink, and the land glowed under the fading light. For a moment, he thought about the first time he saw the sisters standing there, tired and serious, carrying a story with them. He smiled. The porch was still his, but it was also something more now. As the last light slipped behind the hills, he felt a quiet sense of belonging, not just to the land, but to the stories that lived on it. The stars began to appear, one by one, steady and bright. He leaned back in his chair and listened to the night. The land had found its voice again,